wanted to share something with y'all from John, St. John today. It's going to be in chapter 3. Just a little glimpse of it. You got Mark that we believe was written between 55 and 65, sometime around there. It's supposed to be the first gospel, and it was written over to Rome. Mark was believed to have been the one, according to the bishops in the first century, that was an interpreter for Peter while he was at Rome. And so that's what he was writing from to get the gospel, the first one out. And then you go over to Matthew, which was believed to have been written between 58 to 68, after Mark. But it was written in the Hebrew dialect to the Hebrews, and was to depict that Jesus was the new Moses. So a lot of the places that you will see hills, he writes as being a mountain to depict Moses being on the mountain, and just like the fast and everything else. And he was using that to show the new covenant that had come where it goes within. And then you have Luke that was written supposed to have been probably between mid-60s on up to 70 before the destruction of the temple and all. And that would have been done to the Greek by Luke, that was getting all this information, believed to have been while Paul was still alive as well, and writing down the other gospel. But then you have John that comes, and John was the last survivor of the apostles. And we believe that Revelation and the last three books that he wrote was written somewhere in the 90s, right? 90s AD. Not exactly sure when St. John was written, but it was supposedly the last one that was written from Ephesus. And it would have been him seeing what all these people was taking from the Gospels and putting it in his words so they know it's just the little things. Just like we got all these other rules that comes out to correct things that wasn't just exactly right, fill in the little details. If you look at John, a lot of times he puts these little details that you don't get in some of the other ones. And I find that in John chapter 3 right here. And I like that. It brings us a little more detail in what was happening. We find the first of chapter 3 that Jesus meets up with Nicodemus. And that's where he talks to him about he must be born again. And he's confronted, like, born again? How can this be? And so he goes through the process. Must be born of water, then of spirit. You must be born through the Spirit. And so he goes on, and then after he visits with him, we start off in 22. And John chapter 3, verse 22 says, "After these things, Jesus and his disciples came into the land of Judea, and there he was spending time with them and baptizing. And John also was baptizing in Enon, near Salem, because there was much water there. And they were coming and were being baptized, for John had not yet been thrown into prison." One of those little nuggets right there. There arose therefore a discussion on the part of John's disciples with a Jew about purification. And they came to John and said to him, "Rabbi, he who was with you beyond the Jordan, to whom you have borne witness, behold, he is baptizing, and all are coming to him." John answered and said, "A man can receive nothing unless it has been given him from heaven. You yourself bear me witness that I said I am not the Christ, but I have been sent before him. He who has the bride is the bridegroom, but the friend of the bridegroom who stands and hears him rejoices greatly because of the bridegroom's voice. And so this joy of mine has been made full. He must increase, but I must decrease." All right. There's a whole lot wrapped up in that little bit right there. And I love it because in order to get into the mindset on what they're really talking about, you have to get moved back into the Eastern culture. on the way they do things and way they're talking and everything else. I do want to show that this right here is one of the Gospels that shows Jesus and John both teaching at the same time, like a handoff, if you would. Like they're like almost like a rip. You know, like here it is. You got John out there baptizing, telling them get ready, preparing the way, just like it's written over there in Isaiah chapter 40, where it talks about the messenger coming before the Messiah. And then you have Malachi over in chapter 3, verse 1, that talks about the messenger's going to come, and before it says the one with the spirit of Elijah, or it says Elijah coming back. But we kind of find out it's talking about one with the same spirit that stands up before them all, declaring the way. And he's calling out in the wilderness. And that's exactly what John was doing. He had a mission, and his mission was not that of the Messiah. And he even speaks it straight up that I am not the Christ. I am not the Messiah. However, I am the one that comes preparing you for him to come. And that's exactly what he's been preaching the whole time. And here his disciples is, and they love him, they honor him. That's been their teacher. And a lot of times we want to look at the ones that we've been sitting under as, oh, this right here is the Word of God. That's it. I want to go no further. I don't want to learn nothing else but what they have to give us. But the thing about it is, what he's trying to get back to is, it wasn't coming from him in the first place. It was coming from God. It was coming from heaven. And that's the one that we're supposed to be looking for. We're supposed to be looking to God for the message, not man, not anything we see right here. And that's what he was trying to get back to. We find Jesus already started coming out here. We find in chapter 4, if we read a little bit further, that Jesus wasn't really baptizing them, but it was his disciples that was baptizing them into like a ceremonial type baptizing. You once was this and then it was that. We'll get into that in a minute. But they would put it as someone in charge, as being Jesus doing it, because that was his disciples. And that's the reason why it says he was baptizing them. This place it says, and John was also baptizing in, and then because there was much water, that word, and then is like many springs. So you find there's not a lot of water over there for them to be doing a lot of baptizing, but around the Jordan River and this one area, they did have a lot of different springs that you can go to for ceremonial baptizing and cleansing and stuff. But then we come on down. For John had not yet been thrown into prison. The one thing that John is bringing out. Because it's showing that there was a time when they were both out there, and it's showing the changeover. It's showing that you had this one that was leading the way, and you can actually picture them both being in the area and people migrating from one to the other. It's like first you had the Jewish custom where they had to do everything legalistic by the rules and making the sacrifices every year. And then you had the one crying in the wilderness to come, and they start getting baptized like, yes, the Messiah is coming. We're supposed to be doing things right and be living things from the heart, not just about the letter. And then you have the Messiah here. So it's migrating there. Because then in 25 it says, there arose therefore a discussion on the part of John's disciples with a Jew about purification. Many people believe that when it says the Jew here, it wasn't talking about the Jewish leaders and all, because in all the other places they would say Pharisee, Sadducee, scribe, that kind of stuff. It doesn't. It's believed that this right here was one of the Jews that was already been baptized under Jesus' teachings. And so now he's came back and he's discussing it with one of Peter's disciples about purifications, which would have been one of the laws. And if you remember, that was in John chapter 2, that was the first miracle they did, was he put the water in the purification bottles, the 6 of them, and turned the water into wine out of them. Purification, that was like one of their legalistic things where you go in, you wash your feet with this water, you wash your hands certain times, and then before you eat and in between each section of the meal, you're going to be washing your hands like 3 different times, pouring the water over your hands this away, then that away. You know, just a ceremonial thing. It's not really cleaning them. It's just going through an act. But everything that they had built up became more like a burden than a joy. Even going to Sabbath, where you can't walk so much, you can't do any kind of work, you're not supposed to do this or that. It became more of a work thing than a joyous celebration. And to know that, hey, we have somebody that loves us, that made a way for us. We have somebody that's right here beside us. That should be joyous. You know, he never left us. He's going to be right there with us, even in our darkest of times. He never says he's going to take us out of those times, but he always promises that he's going to be with us through those times. And that there's going to be a better tomorrow. I love that part. All right, anyway, we got this discussion going on between the ones that was baptized under Jesus' teaching and the ones that was disciples of John. And so now they're getting all jealous and everything. They come up to him, and this is how we find their heart. Over in 26, the disciples of John the Baptist says, and they came to John and said to him, Rabbi, so another word for master or teacher, he who was with you beyond the Jordan, to whom you have borne witness, behold, he is baptizing, all are coming to him. He who must not be named. They wouldn't even say his name. They were so jealous and upset with it. Because here's the master, here's the teacher, here's the one that's coming and shouting, getting everybody to come. We were baptized under him. And here comes this other one that was also baptized on him that everybody's flocking to right now. And so it was all worked up. Isn't that just like the people? Denominations, churches, you name it. You know, we get so worked up with what we see today. We don't see the big picture. We all do it at time to time. But here it's just painting a picture of what was happening. And that's when John answers back. A man can receive nothing unless it has been given him from heaven. Paul speaks on the exact same thing over in 1 Corinthians chapter 4, where it says, if you've freely received it, how in the world can you boast for having it? It's nothing that you have done, but it's everything that was given to you. And that's what John is saying. It says, what I gave you wasn't from me in the first place. What I gave you was from the heaven, from that above. And if they are flocking to him and he's from above, then rejoice because that is him. It takes nothing from me. It's all for God's glory. That's why Paul goes back and says in 1 Corinthians 3 that, Paul plants, Apollos waters, but God's the one that gives the increase. God's the one that gives the power. God's the one that gets the glory because it's all by him, not by us. He's the one that made a way for us. We've all sinned. We've all fallen short. We've all come just not worthy. But he loved us anyway enough to come down to sacrifice himself for us. Here comes the best part. After John gets through all that, he starts saying, stop being jealous. It's not about us anyway. It's all about God. I'm here to do my work for him. He's here to do his work for God. That's when he comes and says, you yourself bear me witness that I said I am not the Christ. I am not the Messiah. But I have been sent before him. He who has the bride is the bridegroom. Now, he who has, now don't forget this stuff was written like in Greek, Arabic. All these words, they don't go side and side with English. So they put the best words that they can with it. He who has, those three words comes from one that's pronounced something like echo, but with a K instead of a CH. And it means to be bonded with through like blood, marriage, duty. So one that's bonded with. So he who has the bride is the bridegroom. But the friend of the bridegroom who stands and hears him rejoices greatly because of the bridegroom's voice. And so this joy of mine has been made full. All right. History. I love this part. All right. In the whole Jewish custom, right? I know y'all have heard me say it before about the customs of marriage. You have the man that wants to marry a woman, comes up to him with this cup, presents the cup to him. The woman, if she accepts the cup and drinks of it and gives it back, she is accepting his hand in marriage. Then he goes back to his father's house and starts building a place for them to live after the marriage. And he can't say when that part is done. Only the father can come out and say, okay, that's done. It's time. Go get your bride. Well, during that time, you have the bride that accepted it that's supposed to be preparing herself. First thing she does, she has a baptism. This is not a believer's baptism. This is a ceremonial baptism, all the same though, that represents, used to I was on the single market and I was free. Now I am promised to another. Also, at that time that you accept a hand in marriage, you're considered married, just not fully married yet. But you are promised to another, so they look at it just as severe. That's the reason why, even though they weren't married yet, Joseph and Mary had never fully finished the marriage, but he was talking about giving her a letter of divorce, putting her away silently, because he did not want to stain her name. He loved her, but he was going to do it on silence. So even during that process, before the ceremony, and before it finally comes together that night when you seal the deal, you will require a letter of divorce to split it up. So the woman, once she has a baptism, she gets herself saying, I'm now betrothed to another. She starts wearing a veil, covering her face from the others, signifying that she's promised to someone else or tied to someone else. And she starts acting differently. She starts acting like she's waiting for him. She has a lamp ready for full of oil, because whenever the best man comes, whenever they come playing music at night, saying it's time to go, she has to be ready to go at night. Next morning, time to go to a wedding. Now there's another part of this that I have not said before. That is the Shoshben. The Shoshben is where we get the best man from in our weddings today, loosely. The Shoshben is a friend of the bridegroom. And he has a lot of different duties. One, he is the liaison between the bridegroom and the bride. He's the one that carries the messages and words back and forth and talks to them. He's the one that makes sure that everything's going to plan according to the wedding. He prepares the way. Okay, this right here is what's going on. We got this right here set up for it. We got people coming. He's doing all the gathering for the wedding as well. After all of this, it says he acts as the liaison between the bride and the groom. He arranges the wedding. He sends out the invitations. He presides at the wedding feast. And then he brings the bride and the groom together. And then the specific task for the night of the wedding, right? Leading up to it. Because you remember whenever like Jacob went and he was and he sealed with the wrong sister and had to work so many more years for the right sister that he wanted and everything else. A lot of this stuff is done at night. So what the best man does, what the friend does, what John is calling himself, the Shoshben, they guard the bridal chamber to not let any false lovers into the chamber. He would stand guard and only open the door when he heard the voice of the groom. This is why he must know the sound of the groom's voice. Then once he hears the groom's voice and that he's coming, he opens the door, he lets him come in, and then he eases out. And then when they're sealed, he goes away rejoicing because he has done his job successfully. He kept all the false ones away. He did not let it ruin. And he was a friend. He was a friend to the groom. And now then, he is out of the picture, and they are united as one. And if you take all that into consideration, Jesus came to be a friend to us. We're to be a friend to him. If we're a friend of the world, then we're an enemy to God, right? So if you take that back as being a Shoshben, if we're supposed to be a Shoshben to the world, showing them that there is one that loves them, showing them the way, and keeping out the false lovers. The false lovers of this world is all of those pleasures, all of those idols, everything that wants to get in to try to corrupt us and take from us. If we're allowing those to come in the door while the bridegroom's away, and we're there supposed to be manning the door, then we're not a good husband. We're not a good friend to God. And sometimes it's not the door to others, but it's the door to our own self. So therefore, we have to stand guard and listen for His voice. And be a friend to God. Keep all those false ones out of there. And that's where here's exactly what John was calling himself. And that's why he's saying that he's going away happy. It's like that's exactly what's supposed to happen. He must increase. I must decrease. So it's the perfect illustration of the handoff from the old covenant to John coming and making the ease, the transition, and then Jesus, who was about to pick up the cross and make the way. So to me, that I just found that so fascinating, that all these details, if you look at it on a deeper level, is exactly what we're supposed to be doing. A lot of times we read these things and we read it in our own lingo, our own Western culture. Whenever you read you find out exactly what it means in their culture, who it was written to. It holds such more value, especially at this time of Lent season, working our way up to Passover. During Lent, we try to give a little bit of ourselves, a little bit of our time, whether it's watching TV or a cup of coffee or a meal or something, just whatever is between you and God. It has nothing to do with anyone else. Just to spend a little more time with Him, just to read a little bit more, to get to know where you are with Him. And I challenge each one of us to do that. I say us because me included. To take a little bit of time, a little something, and it's individual. Your salvation is between you and God. It isn't between you, me, and Him, or you and anyone else, but it's between you and God. When we stand before that throne, it's between you and Him. Just like mine. So find out what's in your life and just put back something and read a little bit, pray a little bit. Just do a little something more to find out where you're at. Just spend this time just to make sure you're a good friend to Him. Because at the end of the day, that's what matters. And I praise Him for that because He loved me, knowing good and well I was not worthy of it. He loved me when I was yet just a sinner, no good. No, I didn't even care about my own self. He still loved me. So that's why I want to be a good friend to Him. But like I said, each one of us take a little time, find out where we stand, so that He can increase and we can decrease. And that way we can help someone else come to Him.